You can if you actually can meet her actually because she very enthusiastic about what she and her friend had done.
Yeah.
Like they trained. She lives north of Rita Simon,
Okay.
and she would train with the big, one of these big tubes because when the wind wasn't blowing out, it was cold. It's
Right.
less.
Right.
The calorie content intake was like 5,000, 6,000 calories a day, and it was really cod liver oil to keep the supplements in. And I knew her brother. Her brother was one of the people helping set it up. He set it up phone back in 2000. Anyway, that's
Cool. I just read an article recently, just the other day.
Sit up front.
You know what? Man from our area. Or did I tell you that
Rabbit.
fellow was that place in Swaziland?
So I'll go to the middle of the road.
And
The
won
green
the
chairs
award
are
for
a
having,
little more
getting the dogs.
straight.
Yeah, I remember.
Yellow one's kind of
Yeah.
Chippewa.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
really?
like
Chippewa
I'm
Falls,
shaking.
right.
Right, sure. I meditate with
Story.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Greg.
You are?
I'm Kathy
Hi,
Osborne.
Kathy. Yeah, I'm Rita.
Was in the Antarctic 2 months ago.
Were you?
Yes. So I'm thrilled to see what you have to say about
So
it.
how did you go?
We went on obviously a cruise with Viking.
With Viking, okay. All right, you probably did the same time we did.
When did you go?
It was in January, like
Yeah.
January 4th through the 25th or something like that.
Probably same time.
Did you
Yeah.
go out of Buenos Aires or did you go out?
Yes.
Yeah, we did too.
So what cruise were you with?
We were in Princess.
Okay.
On the Sapphire Princess.
Okay.
fair.
Yeah. I know. Very nice. So
We
we
could be here till 10 o'clock talking.
I still can't believe that I was there.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Peter.
Peter, Gordy, we've met before.
We have met.
You were at my house.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Hi, Gordy.
Hi, Warren.
Or what? Oh, yeah, I don't care.
Gary went to ask about it, so he wants us to make sure everybody has one.
Oh, hi.
Rita, hi, how are you?
Good.
And her husband, Gordon.
Hey.
Peter, you can take the comfy seat.
Okay, I'll be.
You can pull it up a little so you can see
That's in the front row.
Only because you made.
Like if I made forced you.
I think there's more people coming
We have to bring some new chairs.
No,
A little lower. What's that?
how many passengers were there on that Viking cruise?
For a day or two anyway.
About 350.
350. It looked bigger than that.
You think?
Uh-huh.
Okay, you know when it pulled into Ushuaia
Yeah.
and it's parked next to all those huge
You know,
ones,
we
it didn't
have
look too
to
big.
Honestly.
I
We
know.
had actually been on the sister ship to that. We took a cruise in June through the Great Lakes
Oh,
on the
okay.
sister ship to that one. So
Fine.
yeah, nice ship, very nice ship.
A chair here.
So did you get to go into Deception Island, the bay? Did you get to go in there? So you went inside?
Yes.
Yeah. So we couldn't do that.
Why not?
How many people were on
The
your
ship
ship?
was too big.
Ah,
How many people were in the ship?
350.
Oh, small. Oh, yeah, so you were in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
How
thought
big
it
was the ship you were on?
It was 2100.
And she threw away the blue.
Really?
But was it older? You know, it's one of the older princess ships.
Still, that's a big
And
ship
they
to
used
have
to be able
down
to
there.
go in there, but then they gave it up 4 years ago because
They don't let it. I'm surprised because I heard that they didn't let any big ships
I mean, our
down
captain
there.
had been in there. I'm sure he's been in there. You know?
Yeah, he said he took a sister ship in there. So it's
Yeah,
the
no, we
same
got
size, maybe
We got into a
8
lot.
years ago, but then they changed it.
We got into a lot of bays, and actually, he got pretty close to the ice. To the
Yeah.
ice
Oh,
shelf.
yeah, we did too. How was Drake Passage?
Going down wasn't bad.
Really, so we had a rough passage.
Going home was not going back north was kind of,
Going home was better for us. It was pretty smooth going back.
it was just the opposite for
Yeah,
us.
coming south, we had a rough passage. We'll talk about it. So I don't know. She's got
And we were on the ship that got hit by that rogue wave.
You were on that?
Yes,
Oh,
not
so
when that happened.
You went before this.
No, we were not. I mean, we were on
Oh,
the
the
ship that
same
that
ship.
happened to, but we were not on the ship.
Well, I thought the ship, the rogue wave ship was a lot bigger ship. Oh, no, so it was a smaller one?
It was the same one that I was on.
Same one.
Same.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, that was like 2 weeks. You must have been a couple weeks ahead of us.
Yes.
Because that was about 2 weeks.
She wasn't on the ship that got hit.
Yeah.
When it
got
got hit,
hit.
that was earlier.
Right, that's what I said, when it got hit.
Yeah.
About 2 weeks before.
Yeah, I think it was like in December, wasn't it, or something like that? Yeah.
We did get hit by a big wave that if there was a piece of ice in it, it would have came right through
Oh,
the window.
sure.
And died.
Sure. I know.
The wave was over the top of the window.
Oh, yeah.
You could see right in the ocean. It was kind of cool.
Yeah,
For a
Drake-
second.
I know.
Then it
I did not realize that the Drake Passage could be as dangerous as it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
No giant squids. See giant squids.
No, we did not see giant squids. We didn't see blue whales. There were things we didn't see. A lot of ocean out there.
So now we have to stop it.
We did see
Now
a
we,
lot of
now we
whales.
can't stop it. Do you want the volume down? All right, so it is, you have 2 people, or 3 people are online.
We did not see a killer whale.
I don't know if you want me to introduce you or if you just want to
They're
introduce
supposed to be
yourself.
twice as big as in
Either way.
Alaska.
Okay.
And none of the whales were breaching. Like they
Yes.
were in Hawaii or California.
Thank you so
They
much,
didn't seem to
Rita.
be breaching. You see any breaching?
Oh, my God, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
We didn't see any
We had a
breaching.
couple of whales that were right next to the ship breaching.
Really? Because these would just come out. You can see they're almost their whole body, but they didn't come up and breach way out of the water like.
Okay. You ready to
All
start?
right, you're ready to start.
Welcome, everyone.
Quiet for a little bit.
All right.
Hi, my name's Rita Simon. I'm from Chippewa Falls, and my husband and I took a trip on the Princess Cruise Line to Antarctica in January. We were gone for 16 days at sea, and plus a couple of days on each end for travel. And it was an amazing trip. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this trip and kind of Antarctica. It's hard to describe. It's hard to tell people what it's like. It's like Wisconsin on steroids, but it's totally different. I mean, so we're just going to kind of talk a little bit. I'm just going to go through, and I want to give you a little bit of information about Antarctica too. So that this is just kind of our itinerary that we had, so you can see where we went and how we went. And so I'm only going to deal with the Antarctic piece, okay? But we flew into Buenos Aires. We took the ship out of Buenos Aires. We had to stop in Montevideo, Uruguay one day. We went to the Falkland Islands one day. Then we went for 2 days and overnight over the Drake Passage and into the Antarctic Peninsula. And I'll show you some better maps of that. We spent the majority of that time in Antarctica around the Antarctic Peninsula. And then we went back up to Punta Arenas and Ushuaia. Punta Arenas on the Argentinian side. I'm wrong. On the map. That's on the Argentinian side, and Punta Arenas is on the Chilean side, and we'll talk about that. Cape Horn, and then back out and up to Santiago, Chile, where we flew home. So these are just some of the places we were at, which I'll talk a little bit about. Of course, Drake Passage, Elephant Island in the Bransfield Strait, the Gerlache Strait, the Neumayer Channel, Deception Island, Cape Horn, and then from there. So give you an idea about Antarctica in general. So I want to tell you just a little bit of history and about Antarctica in general. It's the 5th largest continent. It's all rock, underlayment, land, ice, mountains. There are no land mammals on Antarctica, so no polar bears. So it's a really unique environment. It was first, and it's the only continent that never had a native population of any sort. It's just too The climate is just too harsh. There's no way that people until modern days now that we have ability to stay in those places could ever live there. This first confirmed sighting was in 1820, so we've only actually known this continent existed for about 200 years, which is pretty incredible. And the age they call the heroic age of discovery is when Antarctic discovery really started going. It was in the late 19th century, 1800s, and they considered Shackleton's expedition, which we'll talk a little bit about, as kind of the end in 1917 of that heroic age of Antarctic discovery. So it's pretty fascinating. The other part about it is that I was just extremely interested. There is an Antarctic treaty system, which is amazing because it was the first arms control agreement of the Cold War. And 12 countries signed onto it on December 1st, 1959. 12 countries, including the United States and Great Britain, and I could tell you can look up the list. But they basically agreed that this continent was only for scientific purposes. It's a scientific preserve for freedom of scientific investigation. They banned all military activity, so there can be no military activity on there. And I think there were some current concerns. There were a couple little bases during World War II that would become a hotbed of military activity. And so that's what this is. So there are now 50 international parties, although not all of them have bases or research stations, although there's a lot of, I think there's like, how many research stations? 23, 20, there's quite a few research stations from different countries. Yeah, 17 were added in 2010. And the 50 international parties represent 2/3 of the world's human population. And the idea is that any scientific information that is gleaned is totally to be shared with everyone. So no country can have a border, they can't claim a piece, they can't own a piece. It's owned collectively, and everything has to be shared, any information gained from the research. And I thought, when I heard this, wow, we could do that. Then why can't we do that in other places, in other ways in the world? So I think that's pretty fascinating. So just a little bit about Antarctica. Here's the continent. And of course, this is flat, so you got to imagine it's at the bottom of the globe. So this is a little bit distorted. But I'll just show you some. This is the Falkland Islands I mentioned. So that's up here. Here's the southern tip of South America here. Here's Tasmania. We've been to Tasmania, so that's very close to Antarctica. Up here's the southern coast of Africa. And you have all the different oceans surrounding the Southern Sea. This is called the Southern Ocean, that whole water mass surrounding Antarctica. So this is the line here that separates the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic. And this line here separates the Atlantic Ocean from the Indian Ocean. And then at Tasmania, it gets back to the Pacific Ocean. So that's how all those oceans surround Antarctica, and yet there's the Southern Sea, which is kind of that whole water mass around that. Now, the cool, interesting thing about Antarctica is what's called the Antarctic convergence, or the polar front. And that's this wavy line around Antarctica. And what it does is it marks the point where that dense, cold water from the Antarctic, those Antarctic waters meet and sink below the warmer waters of the temperate and tropical zones. Okay. And the reason that's important is that's where you get all these weather systems forming and all these ocean systems, because you've got this cold and warm water meeting, and it causes all this wave action and turbulence and rising humidity and stuff like that creates that. And that you'll find, we'll talk a little bit about when we get to the Drake Passage. And again, I want you to notice the distance between the convergence in South America versus Africa and Tasmania, because that also is critical in understanding why the Drake Passage is such an interesting place to try to cross. So the peninsula pretty much is where we went. The Weddell Sea, we'll hear about with Shackleton. And that, you really don't want to be in there. Not with any kind of cruise ships and stuff. Because that's where even like in January, this can be pack ice. and you can get stuck in there, which is what happened with Shackleton. So we pretty much came from the Falklands, across the Drake Passage, and then we went into this peninsula here, and then went into some of the bays and the channels in the Antarctic Peninsula. Okay, this is the South Pole. Of course, there's a geographic South Pole. There's a magnetic South Pole. It gets complex. Okay, so that's kind of the lay of the land, so to speak. Here's the Drake Passage, kind of a satellite view. And what's interesting, here's Cape Horn, which if you've ever seen a picture is that big rock at the tip of the Patagonian Peninsula there. And you can see, and here's the Weddell Sea, which often is full of pack ice, and there's the peninsula. So it's very narrow. And because it's so narrow and all that water, I'll show you the next slide real quickly. The water around the continent itself goes counterclockwise, but the water in the seas around it goes clockwise. So right here, this very narrow spot between Antarctica and between the Cape Horn, this water is all coming together clockwise, counterclockwise, plus you've got that narrow space that's squishing through from the Pacific to the Atlantic, and that's why this Drake Passage here can be really treacherous. Okay, so that kind of explains that piece of it. So we were really fortunate that on board we had 4 naturalists plus a woman who told us about all the various cities and stuff, who on days at sea we had 4 and 5 lectures a day we could go to. So we heard about everything from experts. We had, and I'll tell you who they were just so you know. One is Carolyn Gunn. She's a naturalist, and she talked a lot about all the various seabirds and birds. And then her brother, Chris Gunn, who wrote this book, he's a naturalist and a Shackleton expert, and he gave all kinds of talks. They talked about geology, about history, about the various discovery. I mean, you name it, all the animals. We had Roger Raincock, who's a naturalist from Canada, and we had Elizabeth Lewis Williams, whom I really appreciated. She did a talk called Imagining the Antarctic and Artistic Impressions Taking Haiku to the Ice. And so that's where she encouraged us, those of us who are so inclined and interested, to write haiku while we were on this cruise. So I'm going to intersperse some of my cruise haiku as we go along. And so that was really fascinating. Todd McBain was our captain. He gave a talk on your Antarctic experience. It was kind of an overview and the navigational overview, what to expect, and especially in terms of Drake Passage and kind of what they were going to be doing, who they all had up in the engine room, or what do you call it?
Bridge.
Okay, yeah. And there was a really neat guy called Bob Parsons, an older guy who's retired, and he was just there with another guy as ice pilots. And he gave a talk on ice piloting, and actually, for many years, he was an ice pilot up on the Mackinac Straits. So he was fascinating to talk about the ice pilots. They have 2 ice pilots on board. They're there for advisory only because the captain and all the professional people do the work, but the ice pilots are there to advise them and say, I think maybe today we won't go in there. I advise you don't go in there today. And they would listen because these guys are extremely knowledgeable and they've been doing it for a long time. So that's kind of who we had on board. Just another about the Drake Passage. Sir Francis Drake inadvertently passed near it and surmised that it was there in 1578, but never actually went through it. And so the first successful voyage through the Drake Passage was actually in 1616. So quite a few years later. And once the Drake Passage was discovered, then they did begin using that more to go around South America. And of course, then with Panama Canal, they just don't use that for cargo ships and stuff much anymore. So we went through Drake Passage at night. We were in our cabins at night. They told us, kind of what it was going to be about. We'd already had the lecture. And he thought we were going to have a good passage, reasonably good. I mean, it was going to be kind of rough. Told people take medicine if they need it, if they get seasick. But when I'm in a cabin at night and dark, and it's an inside cabin, I love that rocking. I love that. That kind of puts me to sleep. But it was pretty rocky rolly that night. And there were even a couple big, you can't even imagine a big ship like that where you felt like it was like a big, boom. You could feel the whole ship just drop down into the trough of a wave. And the next morning he said, okay, yeah, we had a couple of those incidents, but we tried to. And the next morning the captain came on and told us, because we were across the worst of it, although we were kind of in the fringes of it, that we had during the night wind gusts up to 115 miles per hour and waves up to 40 feet crest. So it was an interesting passage. And what I loved is the next morning, it was still pretty rough. And this isn't a great picture, but it was wonderful. And I got my clothes on after breakfast and went up on 14th deck, and there was a little place where it was kind of sheltered, and stood right on the rail, and I just spent an hour and a half watching the waves go, rolling up and down. I mean, it was just fantastic. The water was kind of a beautiful bluish green. The water's very clear, no matter even if it's really rough, there's that clarity. And it was really amazing to stand out there and watch the waves. So this is one of the haiku I wrote a few days after that. Sees a wild woman, white hair flies, feet tango down, rainbow jewels sparkle. Of course, we're coming out of Argentina. You got to talk about tango, right? So it was pretty amazing. And the other part, this is another one I wrote. We saw Elephant Island, which I'll talk about a little bit later, from a distance. We weren't able to get as close to Elephant Island because it was still really pretty rough. And so we were able to kind of cruise by it at a distance. So this was as we were going past Elephant Island. And again, it was still pretty rough. And so my haiku says, face the gale, raise arms, dance a jig as ship pitches, twirl thrice, ululate, which is what I felt like doing. I mean, I really did. It was awesome. And the wind's blowing, and it was pretty awesome.
Temperature?
The temperature when we were there, before we left, I looked, and they said it would be like in the 30s to maybe lower 40s. Some would say it was in the mid to upper 30s. It wasn't awful. A lot of people had big, heavy parkas and stuff. We're from Wisconsin. We had some layers. We had a rain jacket with a sweatshirt and a couple, we didn't.
Shorts and sandals.
Not shorts, but it was quite windy, and so you really did need protection from the wind. And then when it rained or snowed, we had snow one day, which you'll see, but it wasn't, actually my son came home and he thought it was colder here. So, interesting. But
It was summer there.
it was cool, but it's still cold. But what was coolest for me is as I was standing there watching these big waves come were the petrels, these big flocks of petrels, which is a type of seabird that's in the albatross group. And they ride the thermals of the waves. And so this whole flock would come in behind the ship. This is not my picture because I couldn't take a picture of them. But they would come up and you'd see the flock and they go down into the trough and then up over the crest and down into the trough and up over the crest. And I watched them for a long time. Various flocks of these petrels come riding the thermal. And when they dive down, because the ship is stirring up, they dive down, they grab the fish up, they're eating. Mm-hmm. So that was just amazing. I enjoyed watching those flocks of petrels very much. So this is Petrel Squadron flies brilliant maneuvers. Shoot up, plunge down, level off, repeat. And that's what they did for ages on end. They were amazing. So that kind of was the first couple days was going through the Drake Passage and then down toward Elephant Island. So I'm going to just show you a real quick synopsis of the is everybody familiar with Shackleton's endurance, Shackleton's expedition? Anybody not? Not much? Okay, all right. Well, we'll just talk briefly about it. This is an amazing story. So I really encourage you, if you haven't read about it, read about it. It's just the adventure history of ever. So he started out with a group of men, and their goal was they were going to cross on land from North Antarctica to the south, across land. That was the goal. Well, what happened is they left on December 5th from South Georgia Island up here, which is the Falklands are up here, so it's over that direction. And they were going to head down here and then, find a way to then take their dog sleds and stuff and leave some, kind of hang out there and let the rest of the group go down, where supposedly there was some food stashed at the Ross Ice Shelf on the southern end. Well, they got into pack ice, and this is the Weddell Sea, notorious. And that year they had been warned that there was more ice than usual down there, but they figured it's going to be summer, it'll be fine. They got into the pack ice, and they kept going from December 7th, and they couldn't find a way out of it. And so they drifted with this pack ice with the ship. They drifted February all the way to October 27th, the next year. So, and they went around, and eventually here on November 21st, so almost a year after they started out, the ship sank. And they had been preparing and gradually, getting ready to abandon ship, and they abandoned the ship, and then the ship sank. And so now here they are. They have put stores. They still have some dog sleds. They have 3 lifeboats that they've kind of fixed up as best as they can. And they try to make their way again through the pack ice and over the ice as best as they can. And then finally they get to a point where they can get the lifeboats out and they can make their way by boat, and they end up in this Elephant Island that I mentioned. And they ended up on the east side of the island. All of the land masses there, the shoreline is not much because it's rock. And so the shoreline there really wasn't a lot of space for these guys to have a camp. And so they decided after a short bit that they would try to find a way over the island to the other side and see if it was better, and they did. And so they ended up on Elephant Island until April. So they got to Elephant Island in November 1915, and they were rescued in the following April. So that's how long they were talking about it. Endurance. This is endurance. And finally, a Chilean tugboat driver, because Shackleton and several other men did take a lifeboat and tried to get to South Georgia back to get help, and they were unsuccessful. And so finally, they got there the 3rd time around, I think, and then they couldn't get anybody that would be able to help them. So this tugboat driver from Chile eventually got them out and did not lose one man. So it's an incredible
They
story.
lost some toes.
They lost a few toes here and there, yeah. But it's a fascinating story. So Endurance is kind of the classic book, which is amazing. And then this is the one written by Chris Gunn, who was on our ship. And it's a little bit more of a synopsis, but it has some really good information about the different islands, and it has the maps, some of the maps that I've used in there. So it's pretty, and actually even have them sign it for me, which is kind of cool. So that was real. There was a lot of talk about Shackleton, several lectures about that. So this shows a little bit more some of the places where we went. So as you come past Elephant Island, which we weren't able to get real close to, the goal was to go down the Bransfield Strait and down into the west side of the peninsula, into the Gerlache Strait, and then through the Neumayer Channel and around and up and out. Well, what happened is because of the seas, we came into the Bransfield Strait and went into the Gerlache Strait, but we weren't able to go through. And so we ended up seeing part of the Gerlache Strait, which was pretty incredible, and this icebergs and stuff, but then we had to turn around and go around the long way into Neumayer Channel and then back out. So it was
It was full of pack ice. That's what
it was full of pack ice. Yeah, we couldn't get in there.
Did you guys get in?
But we were over further west than you were. Because we came out of Ushuaia.
Okay.
So we went straight
okay.
down over to that side of the continent.
Oh, my
Timing is
goodness.
everything, man.
Mhm.
I don't know if my video's gonna play here.
Time volume.
Well, sorry, I had a little video here showing the snowstorm. Yeah, it's not, I can't get it to play. That was me in here. It's only like a minute.
It's snowing and somebody's in the hot tub there.
Well,
A sign that says Antarctic 2023.
okay, but what I wanted to say is it was pretty cool. the reason I wanted the video, because people were really excited. The crew was incredibly excited because a lot of the crew are from warmer climates who have never seen snow in their lives. And the one guy, I remember, said to me, one of the crew members said, yeah, they had snow last week because the ship had gone from the opposite direction, Santiago to Buenos Aires, and then we were on the opposite one. Yeah, they had snow coming down last week, and I hope we get snow. So they were out there hooting and hollering, taking pictures of each other. They were just having an awesome time. It snowed for about 20 minutes, maybe half hour. But it was pretty cool. They really loved it. They had a great time.
When you crossed the Drake Passage, did you sort of like perpendicular across the strait, or did you go down the straight away a while and then come across? Or just kind of...
Well, I think he came down at an angle because he came,
okay.
kind of angled down from the
Falkland
Falkland
Islands.
Yeah, because
So we were a little more east.
a little more
coming out
east
of
of
the
that. Yeah,
Falklands,
and I could show you the map if you want to see where that was. Yeah, again. Oh, there it worked. Hey, there's a snowstorm. I pressed it on the hill. They were taking pictures. Wow. Hot tub. I said, no way.
Place to be. Nobody was in the swimming pool.
No, they had that roped off. They didn't want people sliding around. Anyway, they had a good time. It was fun. Fun seeing them. So this was at the next couple of pictures are from our passage into the Bransfield Strait. There were days when, especially in the morning, things were shut off on the deck, where we weren't allowed. We had very low on the promenade deck, just for safety reasons. Because if it was really rough, they kind of, we could watch from inside. But a lot of times you could get out and walk around. And I always, when I travel, take one of my little Native American flutes with me because I call it my little travel flute, and I try to play. And so that morning I had, after breakfast, found a little nook kind of on deck, right in the promenade deck in a corner, and I played my flute. And so the haiku was inspired by my being able to play my flute that day. So flute song, wind captured, wing borne, wave flung, swept high to ice rock peaks and sky. And that was as we were going into the Bransfield Strait. And then Elizabeth, the writer, her father actually, in the 1950s, was a British researcher at Port Lockroy, which was the British station. And he was a researcher there for a number of years. And so she heard all the stories about Antarctica and Port Lockroy and stuff as she was a kid growing up. And she was a teacher, and many years later, her father died. And as they were cleaning things out, she found this diary of all the things he had written while he was down there. And she got really interested because she had never heard all these different stories. He told some things, but not all of it. So she began doing a lot of research about that and looking at pictures, going to the archives for the Antarctic Scientific Center in the UK. And this picture she showed, it's a picture of Port Lockroy taken in 1945, and it's Barrington, that's the guy, swimming in January. That's summer there, though. Of course, you got to remember that summer he's swimming. So she was saying, so wow, interesting. So my haiku said, swimming under ice, human or seal, ragtag shanty dwarfed by icy rock. I just thought that was just an awesome picture. So I'm just going to show some pictures as we were photos going into the Bransfield Strait. It's just got a little bit of musical background. We're going to turn that. Can you turn? Yeah.
lot of times there were low clouds, so you only see 500 or 600 feet up.
What I really loved about the Antarctic was the lighting. It was just between the variation of the various clouds, the sun filtering through on days. We didn't have a lot of real sunny days. The water, depending on what the water was like, smooth, and sometimes it was you could see fairly smooth in places or more turbulent. The way the light would bounce off of the ice on the water, the ice in the mountains, the ice, on the various clouds. So the lighting was just surreal. It's really incredible.
How much daytime versus nighttime?
That time of year it was mostly daytime. We were never up late enough at night.
Never see it dark.
We were up.
We was dark,
Well,
but
I guess
not
that was
dark,
somewhere farther north.
north, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think
So
we
it
ever
was
stayed
dark.
super late. It was still, you'll see there's some duskiness here and there, but yeah,
We were up to see the Southern Cross, so it was dark.
but that was further north.
Further north.
So this is the Newmeyer channel that I talked about. There's just a few pictures from there. That was the one where so that was the Bransfield Strait where we came down. You can see there was a lot of ice. And so we weren't able to get all the way through because it got more into pack ice and we had to turn around. But we had a really nice long time to kind of travel through there slowly. And the captain was really great about stopping and hanging out and letting us kind of see all the beautiful icebergs and stuff. And then we had to turn around. So then it made the trip back around to the Newmeyer Channel actually had to happen overnight because we had to go around. This is the kind of trip that if you want everything to go exactly the way the itinerary says, and those are your expectations, it's not going to work because you're at the mercy of the weather, totally, and the sea. And so you have to be able to just say, okay, it's, no matter what we say, it's amazing. And so there you can see, these are just some pictures, and it's a little hard in here. I shouldn't have really dim lights, but you can see how if you look at most of the islands and the shoreline, it's like the ocean, and then there's a shelf of ice that goes straight up, and then you get, you can see some mountains kind of behind. So a lot of it is like that. There's one where the mountain rises right up. This is the kind of thing they had to figure out how to get around on Elephant Island. To get over the top, to try to get to the other side, hope they had a better place to camp for 9 months or however long it was, and it's amazing. You can see two again. So we're pretty close to all those different.
Did you ever see the sun?
Yeah, we did.
Oh,
Yeah. Glimpses of it.
Sunrise colors or sunset?
Sunset colors. We did have sunset colors, which was pretty nice in places. So I don't know that we actually were. It wasn't really a sunrise because the sunrise is like 3 in the morning or something around the time. If there
We
was
didn't
there
see
either.
anything like the northern lights.
No, which was too bad. We did get
Or
to
the
see,
southern lights.
yeah,
Did you
we
ever-
did get to see
did
that.
you see the southern lights? I don't know.
You see, I think we were much further south than you were
Right.
because you talked about seeing stuff and see. We never got dark. It just never was. It was dusky for a couple of hours, but never dark.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the way it was when we were way
And
south.
we also get very sunny
But I'm
weather.
thinking we saw the Southern Cross was we were more north.
Yeah, because we didn't have a chance of seeing
Towards
that.
Santiago.
Yeah.
So these are just some pictures of some of the land forms around. Deception Island is interesting. That was one of the last places we stopped. Because so then we went to the Newmeyer, and then we came around. The next day went past Deception Island. Then after that, we were kind of back up, going into the Port Cape Horn. This is actually Deception Island itself is an actual picture. Oh, there's supposed to be a picture there. I don't know where it is. There. See, teeny tiny. I don't know why it's like that. There we go. Okay. It's actually the caldera of an active volcano. It's an active volcano in the middle, and it's so you'll see a better picture of that in the next slide. But there too, it's like rock jutting right out of the ground. It's an active volcano. It actually last erupted in the late 1960s, 1967, 1969. There were a number of research stations on Deception Island. They all had to be abandoned because of the eruption of the volcano and the lava flow and the ash, and they had problems with ash all over the place, even farther north. And so right now there are a couple research stations, mostly geologic type of stations monitoring the seismic activity and stuff related to the volcano. But they're only there in the summer, and it's from Spain and Argentina have 2 summer-only stations there. So no permanent stations there anymore. And here you can see there's where you go in, and that's actually the caldera of the volcano. And so smaller ships can go in there. Bigger ships used to be able to go in there, but they kind of quit that. There is a huge, right smack in the middle, where the rock comes right up like this. And so there's a very narrow passage on either side, and you got to know exactly where to go and how to go, or you rip your ship up. So they don't let you go in there anymore. But anyway, that's pretty cool. And a lot of penguins on that island. Deception Island has penguins. From a distance, you think, boy, it's really rocky on that side hill. And then you get the binoculars up, and it's just penguins. Thousands of
Hundreds
penguins.
of thousands, I think.
Yeah. So you can
Do you have
smell-
anything to add about what you guys saw when you went into Deception Island with your ship?
It's your presentation. I just.
She can tell about it after. I don't think that's-
Okay,
It's her
good.
I'd love to
presentation.
hear. I'd love to
I
hear.
know, but it's your presentation.
I'd love to hear. This was really pretty cool to go by this. So this is the haiku I wrote about Deception Island. Massive bayhead cliff, ant-sized orange figures stand, inconsequential. And that came from Elizabeth's, one of the talks I went to, where she showed some pictures again of like Port Lockroy and saying, so what is our activity, is our presence down there inconsequential? It's an interesting question. But the picture she had at Port Lockroy showed a couple little guys like in orange, little minuscule ants. So in comparison to the humongous rock faces there.
Are we looking at the rock of Deception Island? I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that
yeah,
was
yeah,
the whole thing.
that's yeah.
it's a big. From,
Like the bay is there, the bay is to the left. And so if you come out here, this is that rock in the next view. up right here, that rocky cliff there where it comes around. And then you can see the island as we went past it. That's still part of it, but now that's more lower. And what I loved about this, I was fascinated by these swirls of snow. It was like this amazing mosaic swirly pattern going every which direction. It was from the wind and from the ash and from, you know, the rock scouring the surface of it. It was really amazing. It was pretty cool. So these are the whales we saw. We saw blowing, we saw tail flips, we saw the backs coming up. We did not see whales breaching where we were. We've seen a lot of breaching whales in Hawaii and Alaska and stuff, but they didn't seem to be, they were more off a little ways away from us on where we were, but it was still pretty cool. We got to see them.
So those were close.
They were pretty close, yeah.
100 feet up from the ship.
The closest ones that we saw, yeah. But it's the end of the season there. They're going to be heading north about that time, about the end of January, because summer's going to be over, and they're going to be heading north to the warmer climates with the young ones. And so we had ice cream. And that's kind of how we dressed most days. It wasn't like excessively in a rain jacket over the top, hat, gloves. Ice cream tasted really good too.
Oh,
So then, Deception Island, once we got past there, then we were heading out of Antarctica, out of the peninsula. And we ended up going through, so ideally, we were supposed to, I just want to talk a little bit about the Magellan Strait, because you all heard about that in your probably grade school history class or geography, which goes here, okay? And the Magellan Strait, the Strait of Magellan, was discovered and traversed in 1520 for the first time. That was actually the first main route from the Atlantic to the Pacific for several hundred years. And it was not, you know, it was less treacherous, but it was not safe either. So, but it was sheltered, and it was much more sheltered than the Drake Passage. But still, you could have all kinds of big storms coming up, ice, all kinds of things happening. So now when you go through the Strait of Magellan, they require maritime piloting. And anytime, like when I think the next slide shows kind of where we ended up going. We were supposed to come up here. This is Cape Horn here. And we were supposed to go by Cape Horn so we could see it, but we couldn't. Because by the time we got toward Cape Horn, it was too rough, and we weren't able to even see Cape Horn at all. He thought we would see at least from a distance the iconic, but we couldn't even do that. And so we ended up going up this way, which is called the Beagle Channel. Okay, so that's another waterway that comes from the south. And this is where Ushuaia, Argentina is, right there, up the Beagle Channel. And we had, from the time we hit here, we had to have maritime piloting all throughout this whole thing until we got back out to the Pacific Ocean off the Chilean coast again. So they require a pilot on board who knows everything from Chile or from the country that you're passing through, who knows to make sure you don't get in trouble with your ship. So we went up there to Ushuaia. We spent a day there. We did a nice hike in the Tierra del Fuego. And then we ended up overnight going all the way around through here up to Punta Arena. And we spent a day there at a wonderful sheep ranch, which was really cool out in the country. And then from there, we came out and ended up back in the Pacific Ocean. I'm going to go back one quick. From Punta Arena out, and actually I'm going to go back one more because I think that shows the outlet better. From Punta Arena out, you go, this is still the Magellan Strait out through here. And there are lots of beautiful glaciers and waterfalls. That was just beautiful. And that was in the evening after dinner that we went through there. So that was just one picture of the glaciers. They were just all over the place. And then this one was a beautiful waterfall that was coming off the glacier down to the ocean.
It's a huge river coming out of there.
It was huge, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a really pretty trip. And then we finally, I think like by the next day, we were out on smooth Pacific waters, and the
Mhm.
sun came out and it got warm. We actually were able to get in the pool. Again, we're not brave enough to get in the pool when it's too cold. And so it was just beautiful. It's out on the Patagonian Sea. And so the haiku I wrote was gale-free breeze flutters, Tinkerbell spark shattered waves. All is well. It was just delightful, just a beautiful change. Then Southern Cross. Southern Cross is kind of special to us, Gordy and I. I've always wanted to see the Southern Cross. I always wanted to see it. And so when we took a trip a number of years ago to Australia and New Zealand, we finally, in New Zealand, up in the mountains area in the South Island, it was a clear night, and I said, I've got to find the Southern Cross because we were going to be heading away from there and heading north toward the tropical area. And got my little star app out, and I found it. And I found the Southern Cross, and it was just like, there it is. So I wanted to see the Southern Cross on this trip as well. Now, this is not a photo I took because I can't. How do you take star pictures with it? I know that one. But this is the Southern Cross, and it's the typical wayfaring constellation in the Southern Hemisphere, just like the North Star is in the Northern Hemisphere. So when these are lined up, that points directly south. So everybody on the ocean for hundreds and thousands of years used that Southern Cross constellation in the Southern Hemisphere to tell them what direction they're going. So it's a cross. There they are. There's the 4 stars of the Southern Cross. So I wrote Southern Cross, wayfair gems flash in black velvet skies, sea rolling below. And so when we were in New Zealand and we saw the Southern Cross, I had to download Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young's song, Southern Cross. And I love that song. To me, that's a song of the sea. I love sea songs. And so we're on the little balcony outside our hotel room, and we were dancing to the Southern Cross as we were watching. So we did it again, as we were out there one evening, one of our last days at sea, and it was a beautiful evening, and the sun was setting. And that's the night we found the Southern Cross. Got my little app out. We found it. We were way on the front of the boat. Nobody was out there, and I had my phone, and we were dancing to the Southern Cross. It was awesome. So deck dancing, wind swirl, sea rocks and rolls under feet. Southern Cross 2 steps. So after I got home, I think the next morning after we were home, so it must have been Monday morning, I usually sit at my dining room table and I have some reading I do and some reflecting. And I was just sitting there and I kind of had closed my eyes and I could feel the ship moving. I love that. So I wrote, close eyes, sit very still. See horizon lift and fall, feel ocean heartbeat.
Thank you.
So I did have a list of books here, and I think some of those are here. The one I didn't add to the list that I gave, that I found later, is there's a brand new book that was just published this year already, about they spent a number of time, a team, trying to find the Endurance, and they finally found it. They used underwater video cameras. It was a big deal. And so there's a book that was just published, The Ship Beneath the Ice, The Discovery of Shackleton's Endurance. So I definitely am going to read that at some point, but I added that to the list of books. I think it's the book of poetry, Erebus by Elizabeth, and just some other things that she had suggested. So if you want to pick up
I just wanted to add that when you were taking the pictures of the mountains and the ice and everything, I don't think you have, unless you're there, you don't have a concept of how big.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, everything is just so massive. And without something there, like a little person or something to be sitting next to it, you just don't get a sense of, I mean, it's jaw-dropping big. Yeah.
It's, like I said, it's indescribable, really.
Yeah.
All that stuff's impossible to get the magnitude of it with a camera.
Yeah.
I know.
That's why the picture she showed, in which I thought about in Deception Island, the 2 little orange ants on top
Exactly.
of that humongous,
Yeah.
I mean, huge rock face. It's just.
And how big was your cruise ship?
We were on the Sapphire Princess, and I think we had about 2,100 200 passengers.
Pretty small cruise.
Smaller by far, and we prefer that. I don't want to go on those Mongol ones. Not even small. We've been on ships with 300 people and 60 people and stuff over the years, but this came up out of the blue. It was a great deal. We had been on a cruise for a long time, and last May, and we just said, we've been wanting to go to Antarctica. Let's do it. So we did it. So it was an opportunity that we grabbed. And it was quite the experience.
2 weeks, 16 days.
16
It was
days.
16 days on board. Yeah. So it was. At the end, I thought, I don't think I want to do a cruise longer than that. I mean, it was great. It was great, but I mean, it gets a little redundant, on board. I mean, it's okay when you're out doing things and seeing things and stuff, but I mean, we'd have friends who go for a month at a time or more. Or they go do 2 weeks and they do 2 more weeks, and I don't.
There were definitely a lot of people on there that did long
Lots of
cruises
cruises.
Wow.
and liked that being just out at sea.
What's really interesting that they had, who was the man that talked about, because they're about what they do to try to be ecologically sound down in the environment, and they do a lot of stuff on that ship to do that. They have big composting machines on board, and they compost all the food waste, and then they are able to take it up out of the Antarctic. I think in probably Valparaiso, Chile, where they're able to do that. They have to use a different kind of fuel down there in the ship. They can't use regular kind of diesel. And it was pretty interesting how all the things that they do differently compared to those ships in other places. So that's pretty neat to hear about.
So you think if they do it down there, they should do it all over.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I thought.
Anyway, any other questions or any other experiences that you had that were, because you were on a different, much
We
smaller
were in a
ship.
much smaller ship. Yeah. So I think that my experience was quite different than yours. But as you said, everybody's experience is their own,
Oh yeah.
and you just appreciate everything that you were able to see,
Yeah.
And the reason that we picked Viking is because my daughter and son-in-law are both scientists.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So we went on the Viking because it's an expedition ship,
Right.
and it is a research ship.
Right.
So they're very much into that. So that's what that was the draw for
Right.
us.
I would love to have done that. And we've looked at those kinds of
Right.
trips.
Because we were in Antarctica we landed on the continent. We
Yeah.
walked.
We're in
around
the
everything.
Ross Sea area, or where did you land?
I'm not real good about remembering what we were a little bit further south.
So probably below the peninsula along the Ross Sea. then.
Yeah, we actually made it down to the 62nd.
Degree.
Yeah,
latitude.
yeah. So we wanted that experience of
Yeah.
the
Oh,
expedition ship, of the research and things like that. So it was different.
Yeah. We've looked
We
at
had
those
people
over
on
the
our
years,
ship
but
wearing shorts and t-shirts.
Yeah.
It actually got warmer because we had a lot more sun.
Yeah, we had very little sun.
Yeah.
While we were
But we
there.
were in
And
Antarctica
It was
for-
rainy
yeah.
and it was drizzly at times.
We were
and
there
very
for
windy.
we were there for 10 days in the continent. So
Mhm.
your trip was much longer around South America and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We had a
It's
horrendous.
amazing how long it takes to, things on, you look at the map, oh, it's not that far from the Falkland Islands.
Yeah, it is though. Well, 2 days to cross the Drake
to get
Passage.
down,
Yeah.
2 days to get across.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
A lot of the research on Antarctica is looking at what's happening with climate change and analyzing the ice cores there.
Mhm.
So they've found ice that's now 2.9 million years old.
Yes.
Which is the oldest they've
Yeah.
found.
Ice thickness, good ice thickness, that's 2,900 feet thick. And you got to find it just in the right place. It's kind of interesting. Many places it's too close to the Earth's surface, and then that much ice on top of it insulates it, and then the Earth's surface actually in Antarctica is warm underneath there, so that degrades the ice. So you have to do a lot of drillings to find the
Mhm.
right ice, and then you analyze that ice. And so Rita's
My niece,
Niece.
my sister's daughter, who is a biomedical research degree, and when she was in college, there's the big, huge repository of these ice cores from all around, particularly Antarctica and the Denver area. I can't remember the town, but it's right there by Boulder.
Oh,
And so she worked there. She for about a year or two, and she managed when the ice cores would come in, and then they would have to process them. And that she sent pictures, I remember, on Facebook showing, they're in all their garb and they're in this room, it's cold, and these cores come in these great big huge metal tubes, and then they have to, there's like walls and walls and walls of these tubes, and they're all cataloged exactly where they're from, what, and everything. And then research places from around the world can request, I'd like to get this much of a particular piece of an ice core, and then they would have to go bring it out, get it ready, process it, get it shipped to the university or their lab or wherever they needed to use it. So it was pretty fascinating for me that my niece actually worked with those Antarctic ice cores a few years back. So it was pretty
so
cool.
once they get a core in, they break it into five small sections of that big core, and they send it out to 5 universities around the world. And then the 5 universities analyze the ice for many different things. Primarily, how much carbon dioxide was there, when was it frozen, that kind of information.
Aging.
They look at all the chemical properties of it, and then they compare the data from the 5 universities, see if they came up with the same information. So to me, that's one of the most perfect reasoning and examples of how you can prove that humankind has had a big impact on the changes of climate change, and how it's warming so much faster because of that, because there's so much more carbon dioxide in the air.
But also how the data is good, because it's not just one lab doing it. You're getting corroboration that the data is accurate from multiple places. It's really, in science, you got to have that. So it's really interesting.
Fascinating stuff.
Did they happen to tell you why Elephant Island is called Elephant Island?
There's theories. It sort of looks like an elephant head with a tail,
Yeah.
or with a trunk on it. It's what we heard. There was one other theory I heard, but there's no elephants there.
Didn't expect
I think it had to do with the shape.
an island with that name down there in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think they said it was probably because of the shape of it. It's kind of a head, and it's got this little trunk.
Did you run into any other ships?
Oh yeah.
There were smaller cruise ships. We didn't see any bigger ones too much. Maybe one that was a little, but mostly smaller ships, explorer ships, sailboats. We saw a couple.
We saw a couple of sailboats down there, that were like 40-some foot, and I thought, smokes, how did those guys cross?
One cool thing our ship did is that on a previous cruise at one of the research stations, they when they go in down there, they cruise down there, and the captain will call and say, "Do you need anything from us? Can we deliver anything to you?" And they wanted pizza, so they had a great little pizza thing on the one deck there. And so they made up a batch of pizzas, and then as they were going nearby, they took their little lifeboat and buzzed out there and delivered the pizza. Well, so they were going to do that this time, but we couldn't get into that particular station. They had delivered the pizza previously, but there was another one close by, and I don't remember, was that an Argentinian station? I don't remember what country it was.
I don't remember.
And they said, yeah, they take pizza. So we stood out on their deck and watched the little lifeboat go buzzing away with the pizza and around the icebergs into the thing, and then they came back up. It was pretty cool. Pizza delivery by ship.
I hope that they tip them well.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Any other questions? Comments? Pretty amazing.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please feel free to take a book list and have Ann get them for you.
I have Endurance and Empire Antarctica. Those were the two
Those are
I
two
could
on the
get.
list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'll look for the ship on
May
the
I
back.
just see that book for a moment?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's well written.
We have, the people that gave presentations on board are phenomenal. I mean, they're breadth of knowledge. I can't, which is what we love. We like to take trips where we learn things. And they just talked about everything you could possibly imagine is like in Antarctica. It's pretty cool.
Looks like there might have been one person online. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting.